Good evening, everyone. This is Merrisa from GAIA Africa, and I am joining you once again on day 3 of the INC5. We have just stepped out from our first stock-taking plenary on the level of progress that has been made from our various contact groups over the last 2 days. But before I report back on the progress that has been made in each contact group, I want to quote the distinguished delegate from Panama, who today very eloquently took the plenary floor, sending a clear message and signaling urgency and ambition. And I quote, "For our colleagues who don't believe that production is not part of the mandate, let me tell you that production is most certainly part of the mandate and is part of the full life cycle of plastics. While we have sat here, over the last 48 hours, over 3 billion plastic bottles have been produced. Plastic bottles that will ultimately pollute our waterways, becoming microplastics and even polluting our bodies, entering the placenta and fetal bodies." He said, "We are essentially raising a generation of polluted bodies. What are we waiting for? Stop tiptoeing around the truth." And that was the strongest message for the night from plenary this evening. Having received that strong message, I'd now like to reflect on what actually took place in each of the contact groups, as we have received reports from 4 of the contact groups co-chairs. So in contact group 1, this is what took place. Contact group 1 essentially met for 3 sessions so far. Discussions have been made on product design, plastic products, and chemicals of concern as used in plastic products. With regards to product design, there has been an exchange of views by member states, and there is general agreement in the room that product design is a key element, and more countries are actually calling for stringent mandatory measures on product design. However, some countries are also calling for the removal of chemicals of concern and problematic products, a reference being made to problematic products. Proponents on chemicals of concern and member states on chemicals of concern were invited to introduce a submission to highlight conversations with other delegates. And unfortunately, we have also been seeing countries wanting to remove the provision on chemicals of concern, as well as reference to primary plastic polymers under the article on product design. Then we went into conversations around supply or production reduction, which is Article 6 in the current treaty text. And here we received submissions from the Pacific Islands, Saudi Arabia, as well as the African group on behalf of 44 countries, together with Kenya and Iran. And in these following discussions, delegations have exchanged their views with diverging standpoints. Unfortunately, some viewed supply as part of the UNEA mandate and that it should be included in the text, whilst others did not agree with this view. Still yet, others expressed an interest to work on the provision, and some also believe that this mandate should not be actually included as part of the treaty. And this is rather concerning because, from the science that currently exists, chemicals in plastics is actually a huge problem. There are over 16,000 chemicals in plastics, and 4,200 of them have been found to be hazardous to human health and the environment. So we cannot simply ignore this provision and call for its removal from the treaty text. So that was the deliberations in Contact Group 1. So just to be clear, we're still seeing a polarization on the standpoint that member states are taking when it comes to production reduction, as well as when it comes to the inclusion of a dedicated provision on chemicals of concern within the treaty. To touch a little bit on Contact Group 2, which focused its efforts and discussions on waste management as well as just transition. This contact group has actually now entrusted the co-chairs to propose text on waste management after having received a balanced representation of views from member states, and to take into account text proposals made either verbally or online. And just briefly touching on contact group 3, there has been substantive discussions that has been made on Article 11, which is on finance for the treaty, as well as Article 12 on capacity building. So I just want to highlight something quite rewarding and significant. On finance, the African Group of Negotiators have submitted a conference room paper calling for a dedicated multilateral fund to support the implementation and the compliance of the treaty. And this has been supported by over 94 countries, which, receiving overwhelming support and suggesting that we could actually get some, we could get some wins when it comes to the finance and implementation of the treaty. And then lastly, on contact group 4, which is the contact group that basically had discussions around the supporting provisions of the treaty. This contact group is yet to make significant progress. However, they have been able to discuss the preamble, the scope, the objective, as well as the effectiveness and evaluation of the treaty text, together with monitoring. So that is the reflection of the various contact groups that have we've taken stock of in the course of plenary tonight. Concluding tonight's plenary, there was various member states and groupings of countries that were actually also expressing overwhelming concern on how slow progress has been over the last 2 days. So whilst we received all of these report backs from the co-chairs of the various contact groups, member states continued to take the floor in plenary as we started to reach the end, to express that they were highly concerned that we're not really making the progress that we should be making, considering that we have less than maybe 3 to 4 days left for the actual negotiation process. And just quoting the EU, on where progress is at the moment, in opening quotations, saying the EU saying, "Let me be clear that we're disappointed. After 3 days and 2 nights, we have not sent a single paragraph to the legal drafting group or have a provision for the legal drafting group to actually work on and finalize text that will add legal weight to the treaty text." However, the African Group of Negotiators were quite positive in the statement that they put forward at plenary, trying to propose a way forward for us to continue making progress over the next few days. And I just want to touch on, the solutions that they're trying to put forward. They're suggesting to the INC chair that we have a deadline for new text submissions in each contact group, that the INC chair give a mandate to the co-chairs of the contact groups to combine text from all submissions based on the interventions in the room and when all avenues have been explored. And lastly, they're also suggesting that there be an adjustment on the size of the rooms to properly accommodate member states and observers to make meaningful progress. As you may recall from my feedback yesterday, is that, as observers, we were outside these rooms because they were too small and restricted access. So the African group has actually come forward positively during plenary tonight, calling for an adjustment of this and for us to have increased access to the rooms. And then lastly, in the words of Mexico, stating that we cannot go on and on talking about a compilated text and that we need a revised text to be delivered ASAP. Stating support from the African group on this, Switzerland and Chile, who have made strong proposals in this process that requires further support. Thank you. Stay tuned for more updates on our GAIA Africa pages.